Hey guys, it's Mrs. Hernandez. We're going to be talking about wildlife diseases today. So, at the beginning of this unit, we talked about your immune system, how it responds to sickness, and we talked about viruses. And then we're going to be looking at some viruses in animals and also some other types of pathogens as well. So, the first question I have for you: can viruses transfer from people to animals and vice versa? What do you think? If I have a cold, can I give it to my cat? Take a second to answer. Yes, some viruses, not all of them. Some viruses can transfer from people to animals and the other way around. So here are some examples that we're going to talk about. Some well-known viruses. So COVID-19, obviously, we've been hearing a lot about that. And they're still researching, they're still looking into a lot of different things. But what they know now is that they've actually found the same or very similar type of virus that we have seen in humans, in bats, and also in pangolins. So if you're wondering what the heck a pangolin is, a picture for you. Pangolins are amazing. I haven't even seen one at a zoo. They're very rare. So they have these really cool scales. And unfortunately, these scales make them very popular to be illegally captured and traded across the world. So a lot of scientists believe that since they did see this virus, a very similar virus within a pangolin, and the fact that it's being traded all around the world, pretty easy to believe how that can cause a pandemic and spread so fast. So the second example I have is H1N1 flu that actually was a similar kind of pandemic back in 2009. Um, its nickname was swine flu. So they found a very similar flu influenza virus in pigs. The third example you probably have heard of is rabies. So a lot of people will point to bats, skunks, raccoons as sources of rabies, but all mammals can actually spread rabies. Um, and rabies is a very, very sneaky and very damaging virus. So it's important that's why you do not feed. I don't care how cute a raccoon looks, you don't feed them. And I'm going to move my head over here. So our next example is Ebola. So fortunately, in our lifetime, my lifetime, probably yours, we don't have to hear about Ebola that often, but it's a very deadly disease, and the first source was actually a fruit bat. So this bat that's actually really big, just eats fruit, contracted the virus, and then it spreads through any kind of bodily fluid. So it actually was very deadly to whole population of gorillas. So it was very sad, but people can get it too, obviously. So it's also from animal to person, person to animal. Um, Pretty interesting if you're just looking at how the virus can do that, but just so devastating to know how many lives, both animals and people, were affected by it. So those are some examples of some of the viruses that we know of that we've seen in both humans and in animals. So how do we know if it's the same virus? How do they know if my, my flu is the same flu that this pig has? They look at similarities and differences in the virus's DNA or RNA. So some viruses have DNA, some have RNA. Basically, they just look at this genetic information right here. So they compare this DNA from a pig to my DNA here, and if the virus is successfully infected my body, some of my cells will have that viral DNA, and then they can compare and see if the code is similar enough. So if it's similar enough, then they're going to say this is if it's checks all the right boxes, this has got to be spread by animals or spread to humans to animals, and then we'll take the right protocols and management to help people and animals. So, oh boy, I don't want to make my picture bigger. There we go. Okay. So animals can also get sick from other pathogens like bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and worms. And when I say worms, I don't mean like an earthworm, but we'll get there. So, an example of a bacteria is anthrax. You may have heard of anthrax before, but a lot of people don't know that it occurs naturally in the soil. So actually, in some ecosystems, it hangs around and it's not super devastating, but it can be. So a lot of herbivores or animals that eat plants may pick up some of the soil while eating grass, and they'll ingest the bacteria. So herbivores may include elephants or gazelles or even cows. So especially if there's a drought, and a lot of times the herbivores will dig deeper into the soil to try and get moisture, and that'll really bring up a lot of the bacteria spores that the anthrax has within the soil. And so that's where it kind of derives from. And here is what it looks like up here, these purple little dots under a microscope, probably on a grass because it's green. So even though anthrax occurs naturally in the soil, it's not going to be in your backyard. A lot of times it waits for the proper conditions. And usually those conditions are in like a vast landscape like this that's heavily grazed. So that's why it's kind of commonly seen, not commonly seen, but more commonly seen in like where cattle graze. So they need to have that kind of an influence with the soil to be able to thrive. Otherwise, they just lie dormant. So you could have anthrax in the soil, but it's dormant, so it's not going to harm you. So something that is good is that there is a treatment. So antibiotics are really good at treating bacteria, not really a whole lot of good at treating viruses or anything else, but they will help with this. So anthrax is a bacteria. It occurs naturally in the soil. A lot of herbivores are susceptible to picking it up because they eat the grass. So fungi, there is a disease called chytrid that is really deadly to amphibians. Remember, amphibians are like frogs or salamanders. So amphibians will spend some of their life in the water and some of their life in land. Under the microscope, this is what chytrid looks like. And unfortunately, chytrid will infect and damage the outer layer of the amphibian skin. And that's really deadly because amphibians have very porous skin. Their skin has a lot of pores, so it actually takes in a lot of nutrients and water through the pores of that skin. So if that chytrid fungus is covering the skin, it's basically just going to suffocate them because they're not going to get all the nutrients and water they need. So this one, this chytrid disease is super deadly and really unfortunate. It's actually caused upward to 60 different species to be extinct. It's hard to manage because amphibians are pretty much, especially salamanders, are so hard to find that even basically you know that they've died from it after they die. You know that they've had it after they die from it. So in terms of like treatment for this disease, there's really not a whole lot you can do. But there is, oh gosh, there is a topical fungicide. So this is a special treatment that kills fungus. So I guess if you have, like let's say like I'm working at a zoo still and I notice that there's chytrid fungus on my amphibian, I can call the vet. The vet will probably bring topical fungicide to place on the amphibian. You're not going to do that for the billions of amphibians that are out there. But another sad thing is that a lot of amphibians are involved in the pet trade or illegal wildlife trade as well. So there's a lot of movement of amphibians from country to country to country. And so they're thinking that the spread of this chytrid fungi disease is really increased by the pet trade. So in terms of treating chytrid, two things that could decrease the spread be the topical fungicide and just restricting the pet trade or illegal wildlife trade. Reducing it or maybe even stopping it would help these amphibians out. So a type of protozoa is Giardia. So that's this guy right here. So Giardia is actually, it's a pretty common intestinal parasite of humans, of livestock like cattle, pigs, pets like your dog, or wildlife, rabbits, beavers, whatever. So Giardia, this protozoan, can be found in the soil or in the water. So if you're out at a state park, you're taking the dogs out for a walk, whatever, and you have access to like this grand big body of water, there could be Giardia in it. Now, this is more likely to have Giardia than just a puddle in your driveway because this was probably contaminated by a wild animal who had it, and so the chance of spreading it is greater, just depending on what animal has access to the water, right? So, fortunately, there's a lot of dewormers that you can give your pets. So if they've got Giardia, it's probably going to be kind of messy, but it'll get out. Same goes for humans. It's very messy. Fortunately, I do not have to say I've had experience with that, but that's why you just, as good as the water looks when you're at a park, a state park, wherever you are, you don't want to drink it. Lots of things could be in that water. Another thing that could be in the water would be worms. So I try to keep this slide as least gross as possible because they can get pretty gross quick. So this is an example of a roundworm. Kind of looks like a pretzel. This is probably the friendliest picture I could find of a roundworm. And then I included a cartoon because I just didn't want to bring that much into this. But there's a lot of different worm parasites that infect wildlife. So the reason I say they're different and they're not like an earthworm can live in the soil and it's eating dirt and whatever else it can find. These parasites require someone else's body, and they're going to eat the nutrients of either a human or an animal. Now, it's not going to be always deadly, depending on the size of infection, but they are kind of a nuisance and they are going to deplete your nutrients, right? So, and they're not totally uncommon either. If an animal gets it, we can treat it. Or on the flip side too, a lot of wild animals will probably have worms throughout their life, and if they're healthy enough and if they have enough resources, they'll probably be able to just live with it and still be able to survive and thrive. When I worked at a zoo, we had a lot of roundworms occurrences in our bears because they were outside. They still, even though they're in captivity, they're still exposed to a lot of things in the wild. So all we would do is give them a dewormer and then clean up after them. Looks like just a big plate of spaghetti, basically. So that's all I'll say about it. So a bonus wildlife disease is salmonella. So salmonella is actually a bacteria. This picture right here, that pink part is the salmonella. And it is mostly known to be found in like Raw. It's why you don't eat raw eggs, and you make sure you wash your hands after touching like raw chicken if you're preparing a meal. But it also can be found on like a shell of a turtle. A lot of reptiles can carry the salmonella bacteria, but it doesn't cause any illness to them. So it's not like, where you have an animal infected with rabies and they're foaming at the mouth, and you go, okay, well, that animal has rabies. I'm going to just stay clear of that guy. This turtle looks great. But you don't want to touch them. If you do touch them, let's say if, you have a pet turtle or, you know, I don't know, you're at a zoo and they have a turtle out that you can touch, just be sure to wash your hands afterwards. That's all. Because people can get infected from direct contact, especially if you touch something and you touch your mouth, then you will get salmonella if they do in fact carry the bacteria. So a lot of reptiles carry salmonella. They don't get sick from it. We can get sick from it. So I'm going to just quickly go over just some review questions with you. These questions, if you listen to this part, will be very helpful for your next assignment today. So what are the types of pathogens? What did we just go over? There's some that you probably knew about, and there might be one that you didn't know about before this. So we have virus, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and worms, not like the earthworms. So our example, we had many examples for viruses. Our example for bacteria was the not salmonella. It was oh my gosh, what was our example for bacteria? Let's see. Anthrax. Anthrax. Chytrid fungi and our protozoa, which was Giardia, and our lovely worms. So those are the types of pathogens. So looking back at our pathogens, what did antibiotics do to treat? Which one did they treat? Was it a virus, worms, or bacteria? What can antibiotics do? So the answer is C, bacteria. Antibiotics will treat bacteria. They will not treat viruses. They probably will not treat worms. Which of the following is an example of a viral infection? Roundworm, rabies, or chytrid? Roundworm, rabies, or chytrid, a viral infection. So rabies is an example of a viral infection. And then what could decrease the spread of the chytrid fungi disease? So read through these. Which could stop the spread? So A and B could stop or decrease the spread of chytrid fungi. Ideally, the stopping of illegal pet trade would be great, but at the very least, we can place restrictions on hopefully all pet trade, because you'll find that a lot of these ecosystems, we'll talk about that later. Certain viruses and bacteria, they have a place there. They're not going to go away. So it's just about the balance. And when you take something that has been established and really found a good place in an ecosystem and you move it to a whole different area, like in the pet trade, if you're moving a tortoise from the Galapagos and all of a sudden you bring it to America and it's got a crazy bacteria or virus that we haven't seen, all of a sudden that virus or bacteria could have the potential to spread like wild. So it'd be really weary on um, bringing different wildlife from country to country. So that is all. Um, you just have a few questions to answer, and if you paid attention during this, you'll have no problem. If you have any questions, let us know. Hopefully, I mean, the topic of wildlife diseases is interesting, but it's also kind of gross. But if you want to learn more about it, I will put some other links up just as a resource if you want to click around. So that's all. Guys, have a good day.